Hello and welcome to the channel. I am here for a list video for you guys. Now for this list video, I'm not even sure what I'm going to name this video yet because it's kind of a difficult way to explain this list video, but I'm going to be going over the best album of each year of the past decade. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the best album of 2010 all the way to 2019. You guys kind of get the idea, but yeah, you guys may not agree with some of my picks for each year, but that's okay. You may agree as well, at least on some of these, who knows. But just let me know your list in the comments, that's all. Also, keep in mind, I did not hear all these albums when they came out, so maybe some people might think it's not fair for me to place some of these albums as the best of certain years because I haven't heard them when they came out. But, I mean, I really wanted to make an objective list and all that, because some of these albums I did not hear whenever they came out, because some of these bands I didn't get into until recently, of course. So, yeah, that's kind of how it goes, of course. So, let's go ahead and begin with this list video, and we'll, of course, begin with 2010. Now, the best album of 2010, bit of a tough call. There was some good stuff that came out that year, but it really wasn't the best year for music, I think. Now, there were some great bands that came out with music that year, but I feel like some of the band's weakest material, I think, you know, especially when you think about bands like Linkin Park and even Demon Hunter, you know? So, the best album of 2010, in my opinion, would have to go to Cold Day Memory by Sevendust. And I think this album is really great. I think it's maybe one of the best albums from Sevendust. Yeah, definitely a great album, and maybe the best of their modern material, or I guess more specifically their hard rock material. Either this album or All I See Is War. I don't know. Bit of a tough call, but yeah, such a great album, Cold Day Memory. I had to pick this album for the best of 2010. So yeah, many great songs on here. I think this has some of their best work, just maybe. But yeah, Sevendust with their album Cold Day Memory, it wins 2010 for me. Such a great album. Now for 2011. Now, 2011 was not really the best year for music, needless to say, but mainly because, you know, there were some bands that came out with either some disappointing albums or albums that are just kind of mediocre. You know what I'm saying? But the best album to me of 2011 would have to go to Until We Have Faces by Red. Now, maybe some people might think that I'm putting this album as the best, you know, of 2011 for the nostalgia factor, because this is an album I do have nostalgic feelings for. Now, is this one of Red's best albums? No, but I still think it's a great album. There's many great songs on here like Feed the Machine, Let It Burn, Buried Beneath, and Hymn for the Missing. I mean, Hymn for the Missing's on this album. It's one of my favorite ballads from Red, so it definitely had to make the list. I mean, not many great albums that came out in the year 2011, but this is one of the best albums of 2011 for sure, and I had to place it as the best of that year. So, the album that wins 2011 for me, Red with their album Until We Have Faces. Like I said, not their best work, but still a great album. Now, next up, we're of course going to go into 2012. Now, 2012, there's been a lot of great albums that came out that year. So it was rather difficult picking one for this year, but I think I picked a pretty solid choice. So, for 2012, the album that wins 2012, in my opinion, would have to be Clockwork Angels by Rush. That's right, the final album from this band, and of course, rest in peace to Neil Peart, their drummer, one of the greatest drummers of all time. And yeah, this is a really great album. Not one of Rush's best albums, not even close to one of their best, but it's still a great album, and it's a good finale album, of course. This is their final album that they ever put out, and I think it is the best of their modern material. Some of my favorite tracks on here would have to be the title track, Halo Effect, The Wreckers, and The Garden. These are some great songs, of course. If you're new to Rush, looking to check out the band, Would I say this is a good starting point? No, I would recommend either Moving Pictures, 2112, or even A Farewell to Kings. But for what this album is, Clockwork Angels, still a great album. And yeah, I mean, it's Rush. You can't go wrong with them. I mean, they're, of course, one of the masters of progressive rock. So yeah, Rush with their album Clockwork Angels. This album wins 2012 for me. Now for 2013, oh man, there's many great albums that came out in 2013 by many great bands. You had bands like Red come out with an album. You had August Burns Red come out with an album. You even had Trivium come out with an album that year. But for me, the album that wins 2013 would have to go to Disarm the Descent by Killswitch Engage. This album is just really great. This is not one of my favorite albums from Killswitch Engage, but it's definitely a great album. This is, of course, the comeback album with Jesse back on vocals, and it's a really good comeback album. And definitely check out the album if you're any kind of fan of metalcore. And if you are someone that is looking to give metalcore a chance, do yourself a favor and check out this album. It's really great. Like I said, I don't think it's one of Killswitch Engage's best, but I still think it's a great album. I mean, you got many great songs on here, like In Due Time, No End in Sight, Always, and Time Will Not Remain. These are some really good songs, of course. But yeah, this album had to win 2013 for me because it's just such a solid album, even though I don't think it's the band's best work. But yeah, definitely check out the album if you haven't already. So this album wins 2013 for me. Killswitch Engage with their album Disarm the Descent. Now 2014 I thought was another pretty weak year for music. Not because necessarily that there's been weak albums that came out that year, but my problem with that year was there just wasn't much that came out that year, at least that I liked. Now there were some good stuff that came out in 2014, of course. You had Linkin Park come out with an album. You had Slipknot come out with an album. You even had Judas Priest come out with an album. But for me, the best album of 2014 would have to go to Extremist by Demon Hunter. That's right. Now, maybe this might not come off as a shock since, I did become a fan of Demon Hunter whenever, around the time when this album came out. This was actually the first one I've heard in full. But yeah, now the first Demon Hunter songs I ever heard were Collapsing, Fading Away, a lot of their bigger songs in their past days, I guess. But the first album I ever heard from them in full was the Extremist album. But yeah, definitely one of their best albums. Maybe my second favorite Demon Hunter album, and probably the best of their modern material, or, their newer stuff of the 2010s era, I'd say. You get a lot of great songs on here like Artificial Light, What I'm Not, I Will Fail You, and Gasoline, of course. Many great songs, and like I said, I think this is one of Demon Hunter's best. And if you're someone who's looking to check out the band, would this be a good starting point for you? Yeah, I'd say so. It was the first album I've heard in full, so definitely check out the album if you're looking to give Demon Hunter a chance. But yeah, this album easily wins 2014 for me. Mainly because this is one of my favorite Demon Hunter albums, and Demon Hunter, as a lot of you know, they were one of the guys that really helped me get into metal after all. So yeah, great album, wins 2014 for me. Alright, so next up, moving right along to 2015. Now, 2015 has been a really solid year for music. There's been a lot of great albums to come out that year. You had albums by Breaking Benjamin, Iron Maiden, and even Queensryche. But the album that wins 2015 for me would have to go to Of Beauty and Rage by Red. Now, I know some of you might think, what, you can't put two Red albums on the list. What are you thinking, man? Like, I really don't care, man. Red is one of those bands that do mean a lot to me. They were one of the first bands that I ever got into. I got into them shortly after Breaking Benjamin, I remember. But the reason that this album wins 2015 for me is because I do think this is one of Red's best. It's definitely somewhere in the top 3. best Red albums, I'd say. Such a great album, though. Kind of like their return to form album after Release the Panic, of course. You got many great songs on here, like Darkest Part, Fight to Forget, Falling Sky, and Gravity Lies. You get a lot of great stuff on this album. Some of Red's best songs, I'd say. And for me, this album wins 2015. I mean, I think it's the best album of that year. So Red, with their album of Beauty and Rage, this album wins 2015. Okay, so moving right along to 2016. Now, 2016, it's been a really great year for music. There's been a lot of great metal releases, especially in 2016. Very hard to choose a favorite album of 2016, since, you know, you had albums by Meshuggah come out that year, you had Metallica come out with an album that year, you had Anthrax come out with an album that year. But for me, the best album of 2016, in my opinion, would have to go to Dystopia by Megadeth. This album is absolutely just fantastic. It's just a fantastic album. I've heard a lot of people say that this is Megadeth's modern Rust in Peace, which I can kind of see a little bit. And I think because of that, it makes this a really great album. And yeah, it's a heavy album too. I'd say this is one of Megadeth's heaviest albums. This might not be the pick for a lot of people for 2016, but like I said, this is just my list, so bear with me now. But yeah, great album. You got many great songs on here, like the title track, Fatal Illusion, and Lying in State, of course, one of the best tracks on this album. But yeah, Megadeth with their album Dystopia, such a great album. Definitely check it out if you haven't already. I think this is the best album of 2016. Definitely check out the album if you haven't already. So this album, Dystopia by Megadeth, it wins 2016 for me. Moving right along to 2017. 2017 also was a kind of a weak year for music, mainly just given the lack of bands that have been releasing albums and things like that. 2017 was easy for me, very easy. This has always been my favorite album of 2017. You guys might know what it is, but it is The Sin and the Sentence by Trivium. And I do think this is actually one of Trivium's best albums. Maybe my second favorite Trivium album, but yeah, definitely a great album. Got many great songs on here, like the title track, Beyond Oblivion, Betrayer, what's it called? The Revanchist, of course, one of their most unique songs, Thrown into the Fire. Many great songs on this album, but yeah, The Sin and the Sentence by Trivium definitely had to make the list. I mean, such a fantastic album, and one of Trivium's best, of course. So yeah, this album, The Sin and the Sentence by Trivium, this album wins 2017 for me. Moving right along to 2018. 2018 wasn't the worst year for music, but it wasn't the best either. 2018, there were a lot of great albums that came out that year, but this one is still very easy for me. The best album of 2018, in my opinion, goes to Firepower by Judas Priest. Of course, this may not come off as a shock to some people. This album, I think, is absolutely fantastic. I think it's maybe one of the best metal albums in years. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, such a great album. Probably their best album since their early 90s stuff. I don't know, but yeah, definitely a great album. I was really blown away by this album, my first listen. Many great songs on here, like the title track, Evil Never Dies, Rising from Ruins, Traitor's Gate, and No Surrender. You definitely get a lot of great stuff on this album, but yeah, Firepower by Judas Priest. This album wins 2018 for me. I mean, it's Judas Priest. They're metal legends. I mean, this is definitely at least one of the top 3 best albums of 2018 for sure. I mean, definitely check out the album if you haven't already. Now for 2019, guys. Now, if you've seen my end of 2019 video that I did, you guys might already know what it is. But the album that wins 2019, in my opinion, would have to go to The Verdict by Queensryche. This album is fantastic. Still holds up for me today. I think this is Queensryche's best album since their 90s material. You got many great songs on here like Man the Machine, Light Years, Dark Reverie, Bent, Portrait. Yeah, you get a lot of great stuff on this album. Now, Bent might be my favorite song of 2019, but yeah. The Verdict, such a great album, and I think it's the best album with their current vocalist, Todd, of course. Now, 2019 was just an outstanding year for music. It's easily been the best year of music of the last decade. I mean, you had albums by Tool, Killswitch Engage, Slipknot, and just many others that came out that year. But for me, The Verdict by Queensryche wins. But yeah, such a great album. If you have not listened to this album yet, please give it a listen. It's my favorite album of 2019. You will not be disappointed. Everything about it is fantastic. So the album that wins 2019 for me is Queensryche with their album The Verdict. There you go, guys. That's my list video of the #1 best album of each year of the last decade. Feel free to let me know what you guys think in the comments. So with that being said, thanks for watching. Have a nice day and take care.